Hello there, this is Eva, and I'm leading the discussion on Chapter 7 of Skinner's book on thinking. I'm sorry if there's a weird sound, I just started doing my laundry, and it didn't occur to me that you might hear that, so sorry. I also don't know if this will hit 10 minutes, but I will definitely try and talk about as many of the main points in the chapter as possible. If I'm looking down, sorry, I have a bunch of notes. Okay, so most of this chapter is geared toward identifying different behavioral processes. The first staple idea of this chapter is Skinner stating that thinking can mean like behaving weakly. And I had to reread this paragraph multiple times because it was kind of confusing at first. So he makes it out to seem that our thoughts are often unsure things due to something called defective stimulus control. And the example he gives is someone being shown a foreign-looking tool and saying, I think this is a kind of a wrench. So there are a lot of doubts in the human mind, and even in situations where we absolutely know something for sure, we prefer to say, I think instead of I know. And the next term he labels is covert behavior. I had to do a little bit of extra looking around to try and wrap my head around this and make sure that I described it correctly. And I gathered to believe that it means a behavior small enough that it mostly goes undetected. So it's usually like your own private thoughts or private event that no one else is aware of. And I believe it's an action or behavior that we can perform and then retract. So it's where we can come up with consequences for a potential action and then examine and adjust it. If that is not correct, please tell me, but that's what I was pretty sure it meant. So like Skinner uses a chess player as his example, saying that they can perform different hypothetical outcomes in their mind before they actually, make a physical move in the game. So that's what I thought it was. I really hope it was because I felt so sure about that. And the next topic is on stimuli and our perception of stimuli. So we as humans have almost a genetic ability to assist ourselves in enhancing our senses without even realizing we're doing it. So some of the examples that he gives are like closing our eyes to block out visual stimuli or covering our ears to drown out loud noises, or doing anything that kind of helps us focus on a particular sound or sight or smell or taste or touch. So something he mentions that I thought was really interesting is our ability to attend or ignore stimuli that's coming from the same sense. So an example of that would be, without changing anything physically, like being able to block out in our ears certain instruments in a musical piece and just pick out like the piano, which is something that I do a lot, and it's amazing that we can do that without, if you blocked your ears you wouldn't be able to hear anything, but that we can just block out everything else except for one. It's pretty amazing. He then briefly talks about something called place learning. So his example that he gave of this that helped me understand it a little bit better is teaching a kid addition facts, like 3 + 9 is 12. So sometimes kids will learn to respond with 12 whenever they hear that question, regardless of if they understand it or not. But only half will be able to correctly answer 9 + 3 instead of 3 + 9. But then he asks that question, are those kids who are answering both 3 + 9 and 9 + 3 as 12, do they truly understand like the mathematical equation that's happening, or have they just learned to respond 12 to both of those? So are they just remembering twice as many equations as the rest of the kids, but they still don't understand it either? So after that was what I thought was the most interesting like subcategory in this chapter on search and recall. So this is when the brain looks back on past experiences and then reacts accordingly in the current situation. So he says his example is of a hungry animal looking for food. So this act alone is probably more genetically based. It is a survival instinct, but the way that the animal hunts and gathers its food is chosen by past successes and fails. So knowing that it needs to gather food and going out and doing that is the genetic part, but how he does it is based on search and recall. So the next two paragraphs are about memories and how we store physical experiences in our head as memories. So since keeping an exact like three-dimensional replica of an experience is impossible, we create our own versions of them in our minds that allow us to remember events, faces, names, dates, places, etc. And the fact that we can remember things like musical numbers is incredible, because music and sound is not a physical object that we can give a dimension to. This whole page was kind of mind-numbing, but I think that that was the general gist of it. If you were able to gather something more from that, please share. Please share, because I'd really like to discuss that a little bit more. In terms of recalling, he also promotes using mnemonics and giving our brains like a running start. So he gave two really good examples of that. I'm sorry, I'm looking down so I can remember them. So if you have like a song running in your head and you cannot remember the next verse, he says that there's a good chance you can remember it better if you just restart the song in your brain and go through it again. Because now you've given yourself momentum into that memory. And the other example is when he mentioned before about remembering somebody's, oh, he didn't mention this yet. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm so excited. He brought up remembering someone's name by running through the alphabet. Not so that you can go through and remember every person whose name begins with A and every person whose name begins with B. Instead, when you hear the sound that that letter makes, that will trigger you to recall a particular name. So if you hear just the sound, you might remember Michael. So he finishes that section off by saying that this whole metaphor that our brain storage space is kind of like a computer is not accurate at all, and he does not like that. So don't think that. After that, he talks about how to solve problems. So buckle up. Here we go. A problem in simple terms is when we know our desired outcome, but we don't know the response to get that outcome. So if we go back to that previous section on recalling, like I got excited about before, a problem that could arise is when you're introducing someone but you suddenly forget their name. The solution would be just to recall it by maybe going through the alphabet, or maybe you have another mnemonic that will help you remember it. That is a very, very, very basic example that he gave. To solve more complex problems, we must come up with multiple actions, analyze our outcomes, and then make a choice. And it kind of combines all of the previous sections together. The next section was by far the most confusing to me, which is exciting because I was confused by a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to pick some of the topic questions from here. This section was on the creative mind and based largely on where our original thoughts come from. So especially in terms of sorry, there's a fly. Musical composition, art, and writing. So my first question is pretty simple. What was the general attitude you got from these 4 paragraphs? And how do you think we achieve original thoughts and ideas if most of our decisions are based on recall or covert decisions? If that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask me more and I'll try to clarify. The last 2 topics are on the mind, and Skinner sums it up as human thought is human behavior. And we consider both our mind and our brain to be where thoughts originate from. So there's a lot in this chapter, and even though I read through it like 4 times, I still don't completely understand everything. And if I said something you disagreed with or interpreted differently, please share. I would really like to hear what you all took from this chapter. So that is my little discussion video. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.